Sometimes I speak very off the cuff, but today I have some really important reflections to share, so I will try to just read it word for word because a lot of thought and discussion went into this, including late into the night last night, including some speakers from the weekend who helped me with this. And also, ultimately, I want to get to read you some things from this book, Mindful of Race, by Ruth King. So thank you for those of you who expressed support yesterday and did what you could to help each other process everything that we've been experiencing together this weekend. It's been a lot. And I also want to encourage you to film my comments and share it with people who could not be here this morning. In general, one thing I really like about WVC events is there's not a lot of photograph and video that gets shared publicly, but of course we trust you to use discretion with what you share. There is an official photographer here with a black hat in the front row. He's very accessible. He will make sure that you're okay with being photographed. Feel free to approach him if you would like to be photographed. He takes really good photos. He's taught me a few tricks about getting good photos. And important topics this weekend, and we will continue to today. Some of them are very uncomfortable. We knew that it would be uncomfortable. I think every psychedelic event I've been to and many other kinds of events, there are moments that are very uncomfortable. I'm hoping that there will be enough space for you to begin the healing and integration process today. I know many people will fill in throughout the day. And just a really quick history. Some of it's been shared over the weekend. Women's Visionary Congress was formed in response to the overwhelming number of white male speakers at psychedelic conferences such as MAPS. I'm a brand new board member, so I'm speaking from my understanding of the history and my what I've seen as an attendant. For 10 years, we held an annual retreat, either at Hot Springs or at the IONS Retreat Center in Petaluma. It became very expensive. Really, there's a few reasons I joined the board this year. One was we as a group, we felt very compelled to work towards events that are more affordable and accessible and inclusive. It's a work in progress. Thank you for being part of it. And this time around, I've seen more representation this weekend. Obviously, we still have a long way to go. And I want to mention that speakers are invited to WVC to share their perspective with us because we support their work. The vast majority of you have been respectful and know that we do not exclude men. There are plenty of men here quietly respecting that this is a women-led event. A really quick bio on myself. I thought I'd mention I'm descended from colonizers who had a hand in stealing the land that we are on right now. I joined this board. The other main reason I joined this board is because of Maria Mangini, one of the co-founders and current board members. She's one of my biggest teachers of how to create space for women. And I've worked with her for over 10 years as office manager at Dr. Frank Lucido's office. And originally from Chicago, I lived in the Bay Area for almost 15 years until this year. I just relocated back to Chicago to be where I'm from and where my family is, but of course, couldn't miss this event. I've been involved in drug policy reform since 2001 when I was in college. I founded my company, THC Staffing Group, 5 years ago with my best friend, Shalene Title. My company does recruiting and consulting for the cannabis industry that's focused on diversity and inclusion. And my personal motivation is to change culture and laws so people do not go to jail or prison for cannabis or psychedelics, for any drugs, and for people with criminal records to be pardoned and sustainably employed. also to work for access to psychedelics for people who need healing the most. And it's not a competition of whose trauma is worse or who needs the most healing, right? But at the end of the day, we only have so much time and space and resources, and we're doing the best we can as a whole. And I think most of you in this room understand what I mean. That we're I'm trying to use my privilege to work for access for people who need the healing more than me. Thanks. Gosh, so many good speakers I wanted to highlight, but I think we might just get through that briefly so that our next speaker can come up before. I did want to mention, though, Ismail Ali on Friday night. I haven't heard us repeat this enough. He said that the theme of his talk that I noticed was that he's working towards a world that is just. And he also pointed out something so powerful that we need to remember, that legalization is permission to commodify. And I know that many of us, one of our common denominators is that we see the problems of capitalism and what it's doing to us as a people. Joy Moore asked us to stop referring to people of color as minorities. Sunshine Lencho tried to help us implement our visionary goals yesterday. And I'm inspired by Ifeitayo Harvey. I wrote something that some of you maybe haven't heard this before, Dear White People. There's like movies and probably podcasts and lots of blogs and things. Dear White People, I'm saying this, as a white person. We need to do better. Many of you are here because you want to better understand your privilege and be part of the solution. A few of you were or are here to make women of color feel unwelcome. I will not allow that today, and at any event I'm part of. Because of yesterday, now I know how to better do that, and what I can do, even if it's not received as the most appropriate or polite thing to do, that now I have even more ideas of how I can help create a safer space for women of color. So, if and this is still Dear White People, if you feel unsafe or excluded, there's a lot of healers in the room. There's a lot of healers in this organization. There's a lot of resources available for you. So if you feel unsafe or excluded, there's a lot of different ways to go about processing that and dealing with that. One suggestion I can make if you're not sure what to do, you can, some people my elders that I've learned from, channel it into a higher consciousness. It's difficult and exhausting work. People of color have been doing it for generations and continue to have to do it every day, right? So, just a few quick announcements about today. Today's Father's Day, I heard, right? Okay. But actually, more importantly, today is Juneteenth. Yeah. So, I think we'll have a chance later to talk a little bit more in detail about Juneteenth, but you can Google it. There's a lot of things that come up throughout WVC events that you can Google, and I don't want to take too much time, but Juneteenth is an important holiday marking the official end of slavery and in the U.S. And yesterday was celebrated in Oakland. Today there's celebrations in Berkeley and Richmond. So after this event, there is an after party that we'll be telling you about, and there's also Juneteenth events going on all around the Bay Area. We mentioned Maria Sabina briefly. I don't have time to go into that. If we have time later and people want more information about Decriminalize Nature campaign in Oakland and Maria Sabina. And then to get to the book, let's see. Oh, good. I'm good on time. Okay. This book, Mindful of Race, was recommended to me by Kati Silva, who has been at some WVC events and worked with us until recently. And what a gift that she recommended this book, because I find it to be very appropriate for what I wanted to open with today. Also, one of the speakers later today, Elise, had told me about a book, Emergent Strategies. So I wanted to also mention that one, and I think maybe we'll touch on that a little bit more later. So for this one, Mindful of Race, it's called Transforming Racism from the Inside Out, and it's by Ruth King. She's a Black woman until recently, and then she moved to North Carolina. And so some of this book is about that difference between Berkeley and North Carolina. Definitely, my goal is not to it apart and give you just bits and pieces. Ideally, I would have more time to present her work in a more thorough way. So I wanted to mention that it's not ideal for me as a white woman to just read random parts of her book to you, but that is what I'm going. Some other opinions if this seemed okay, if this was right to do. So let me just drink some real quick and then I'll do this. Feel free to get up and move around if you need to while I'm talking, or close your eyes, whatever feels comfortable for you this morning. This is also written by, the author is Buddhist. The introduction, racism is a heart disease, and it's curable. Something alarming happens when we think or hear the word racism. Something deep within us is awakened into fear. All of us, regardless of our race and our experience of race, get triggered, and more than the moment is at play. That word picks at an existential scab, some level of dis-ease at the mere insinuation of the word, some itch that we can't seem to scratch, or some fear we believe will harm us. This activation happens to all of us. And by the way, this book is written for everyone. She's very clear when she's switching between speaking to people of color and to white people. I just have found this book really helpful. In the West, we live within a racial context of hatred and harm, whether subtle or openly cruel, whether out of innocence or ignorance. The generational and often unconscious conditioning that has bred social and systemic norms of racial dominance, subordination, and separation, nuanced in every aspect of our day-to-day lives, is tightly sewn into the fabric of our society. The world's heart is on fire, and race is at its core. What's happening in the world today is the result of past actions. The bitter racial seeds from past beliefs and actions are blooming all around us, reflecting not only a division of the races that is rooted in ignorance and hate, but also, and more sorely, a division of heart. Racism is a heart disease. How we think and respond is at the core of racial suffering and racial healing. If we cannot think clearly and respond wisely, we will continue to damage the world's heart. Racism is a heart disease. Many of us can live for a while with a heart disease without knowing it. And others of us know we have a heart disease but are afraid or even in denial about it. But racism is a heart disease and it's curable. This book points us towards racial harmony and healing. So one theme I've noticed this weekend and also in this book is about our ancestors and our historical trauma, and that it's always with us. Sophia Buggs went into a lot of detail about it in her TED Talk that she shared with us also. So this author is saying that if you're going to do this work, you have to bring at least one ancestor with you through this process. All of us can think of at least one ancestor that struggled with racism in some way. And in the author's words, in the work of racial healing, we soon discover that we have inherited what's unfinished from our parents and ancestors. The meaning of our practice is deepened when we remember that we are not just doing this inquiry for ourselves. Bringing an ancestor with us can support our mindfulness of racial inquiry and healing. Oh, I won't read all these, but I just wanted to point out, because I really want to entice you to read this book. There's this section that is just like stereotypical quotes that she hears. She does a lot of, Ruth King does a lot of teaching and workshops. Some will be all white, some will be all people of color, some will be both. So throughout the book, there's these sections that just have like stereotypical things that she hears all the time. So there's patterns, like so many of us are struggling with this, and I occasionally blurt out something that just really feels very racist to me. So this is really common, and her point is that like we all struggle with this. I'll just read a few. Some that whites commonly say. Race is an illusion. Why are people of color so attached to this concept? Can't we just let it go? I don't know what I don't know. People of color need to teach me about race, tell me what to do. Why are people of color so angry with me? I wasn't living at the time. And I feel like going into this weekend, I thought I would need to get into more detail about this, but we've covered a lot of this together, so I'm really proud of that. We've had a chance to, for some of us, it's the first time we're thinking about these things, and we're able to make connections here to continue that conversation. So just a few more. Like it or not, the ways of our parents and ancestors are with us, even when we don't know them, don't like them, or don't remember them. Our sense of self and our family both require each other and complete each other. Even though we grow up and change, we are who we are because of our parents and ancestors. In fact, what we have come to know as our individual selves is more an experience of relativity or kinship with agency, the ability to make choices and be influenced or shaped by the choices of others. The bottom line is that whether intentionally or unintentionally, we pass on a patterning to present and future generations. As individuals, we have all had a range of experiences, many joys and sorrows that have shaped our lives. Each of us has experienced physical and mental hardship, and some of us have carried an indescribable weight from past wrongs. We all have the indelible markings of trauma, timeless wounding, and the dignity of survival. Early traumas shape how we relate to life and to race. And last of her work for now. What's unfinished is reborn. Institutional racism and historical racial trauma have generational impact, causing substantial and long-term damage to our cultural and psychological well-being. It's important to understand this stained soil of United States history and to recognize how white supremacy has systematically and intentionally resisted human equality in favor of power, greed, and how this cultural swamp has impacted us all. And again, there's so many healers in the room. So, this is also about that, we all are here because we believe in the potential for healing around all of this. So I think it is a good segue to our next speaker, who I'm so interested to hear, because our next speaker will talk about ketamine, and I think Annie, you're doing an introduction. I wanted to just segue for myself that I don't know really anything about ketamine. I can't keep up with like all the, and then new club drugs and stuff come out, and I'm like, oh boy, okay. I know what I don't know. I don't know about ketamine. I know that it's helping a lot of people, and I was thinking about it yesterday and was able to talk with some people. Thank you for people who shared their personal stories about ketamine with me yesterday. That it reminded me that often what we see and hear about drugs are when people are having a bad experience with it. So my experience as an elder in Students for Sensible Drug Policy and other events and organizations is like I see and hear about when people are having a bad experience with ketamine. But I don't necessarily see or hear all the people are having a good experience. So I think that's a theme throughout Women's Visionary events it reminded me of when Kat Harrison did a presentation about tobacco maybe 4 years ago, and completely shifted my perspective on people who use tobacco. Yeah, it was so powerful, and thank you for being here. To the next speaker.